I kept that off the recording.
You did. You did. Well played. But that's true, the saying. I built a career on that saying. To know where the line is, first you must cross it. So I've done the burnout roller coaster twice.
See, I'm pulling you off the ledge, bro. Don't go near
Yeah.
it.
So I know where the ledge is, at least. And I'll full transparency, totally honest with you, because I'm always honest with you. Like, no, 3 weeks ago, maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, I was getting close. I could feel it.
Oh,
Could
so
feel it.
now you're on the backside of like
I'm
not
cutting it back.
not jumping off the cliff to go back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm gonna step back from the cliff instead of jumping off the edge in order to.
Well, yeah. Then
So what are your go-tos for somebody that's dealing with um adrenal fatigue for lack of a better term, for lack of a funner term, because HPA axis dysfunction is a mouthful. Adre- Adrenal fatigue.
that gets into $10,000 words that are I always tell people above my pay grade.
Yeah, just say
But
adrenal fatigue. It's fine.
um I mean, there's so many of the Ayurvedic herbs that are ones that like we don't hear about in America, right? So ashwagandha is the big popular one that everyone hears about. Ginseng is another one that is like a go-to that people will discuss. But then you get into the different forms of ginseng and then their names get crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but ginseng is more of a you could say as a I don't know if it's an adaptogen. Is it?
Yeah, there to
Is
me
it?
that
So they kind of all are.
yeah, to me that's what everyone needs when they're in a blown out situation, you know.
Return to homeostasis.
For me my biggest experience in life with the people who are in that space, and it's like I want to help them, I want to help them, but it's like I can't stop doing this to their mouth, right?
Right.
It's the all day long coffee drinkers, and
Yeah.
not just like and they've been doing it for years, right?
You can't
but
function.
but if they get to the point where they're like, okay, I'm tired of this being my energetic place, I'm so over this, and they're finally ready to be like, I'll put the coffee down. Like, I'm not saying for life, right?
Yeah.
uh but if they'll finally put it down for a little bit, I mean, shatavari, uh I,
Shatavari.
that's like the one that's known as like 1,000 horses, and it has a ton of benefits for women around their cycle, is where it's talked about, but it has just as many benefits for men for their hormones.
Cool.
And tempted to go grab some and be like, see, I can't pronounce this, but what's this word? But like, whether it's different types of berries or roots or herbs that are going to be things that people can find on the internet when you search for adaptogens.
So do you have like a protocol that you would give to somebody that was in a depleted state or burnt out?
uh I would give them a protocol if I was working with them.
So it's more individual.
Yeah, but like for me to decide with them versus me to say, here's a protocol. For me to say, here's a protocol, I'm just telling people you got to test and assess with yourself. Like, you got to
Okay.
go out, you got to try, get a bunch of different things. You got to start figuring out how you can put them in your life. You got to start to see how you feel. How do you feel 4 hours later? How do you feel 24 hours later? How do you feel a week later? For
Okay.
women, it's within their cycle. Like, each cycle, their hormones are different. So are you good in week one? And when you're using that supplement, and then a month later, like, what does that start to look like 3 months later when you've been using that? So like their experiment becomes bigger and larger, but they also have an extra detox cycle and symptom that men don't get to like physically see.
Yeah.
So it's pros and cons to that, I guess.
Yeah, they have an intense detox cycle every month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that's when it gets interesting, is because then when it gets to the end, or their body starts to no longer be healthy to keep doing the reproduction cycle, then they get a whole new experience. But a
Right.
lot of what people experience on the backside and they complain about is because they didn't have the healthier detox stuff taking place when they were younger before they got to that stage.
Yeah.
Because they don't, it's not even recognized as detox by most women. It's recognized as a pain in their ass.
Yeah. Well, not technically, but
Thank you for that.
um, so the adaptogens, ashwagandha, ginseng, um, what about shilajit?
Shilajit is going to be really powerful for all the minerals.
Okay, not necessarily an adaptogen, but more of a mineral
I mean,
balancing kind of thing.
I could see where someone would argue that they're going to be getting the adaptogen
Oh,
benefits.
yeah.
Ultimately, to me, most of us are just deficient in micronutrients, and we got too many toxins, and we don't have the right cellular communication taking place.
So
So
is shilajit kind of, does it also work as a chelator, kind of like a heavy metal detoxifier, or
I,
what's the word that I'm looking for that helps
yeah,
you
yeah,
get rid of heavy metal?
heavy metal detoxifier. I mean, basically, it can just be too powerful. So,
Okay.
like, some people can learn, like, hey, this is a really great food and it's so good for me. But then that person has so much going on with them that they just get this abundance of minerals and this, like, detoxifying agent that's going in them. And they've got a pounding headache. They feel like crap. They don't know what's going on with them. And they think they're sick, or they have an allergy,
Right.
or, and they won't even make the connection.
Or they're fatigued all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just too much. So that's why, to me, it's really about the human that's in front of you that you're working with versus people who just talk about all these amazing things. Because even right now, a supplement that I'm working with, that they keep saying, take more, take more, take more. But like, I can only take so much of it because I notice the detox response. And I'm not trying, I like the detox response, but I'm not trying to step on the gas and feel terrible for a detox response at the same time either, right?
Yeah. Who um who's telling you to take more? The manufacturer?
No, people in the supplement company tell you to take more if you're not noticing a response. And for people who have really bad reaction or health conditions, um, and I had to start taking more in order to start to notice what they were talking about. Um, but then I also just found where it was like, no, this is a cool amount. And where sometimes some people, they don't even have to take the recommended amount, and they start getting the detox response. So
So when you work with somebody um on all of this, are you doing blood work? I mean, not you specifically, but are
yeah,
you
I mean,
requiring them to
definitely,
get some blood work done?
I am not doing blood work. I am not reading blood work. I will look at blood work
Yeah,
and kind of share my 2 cents in opinion based on whatever a professional might be saying to them.
right.
Um, but I prefer to steer someone towards biofeedback than even blood work,
Okay.
because you can get more results, you can get an assessment, you get therapy sessions on top of getting assessments, and it's all about the same price. Like, you can say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, and then you can get a follow-up assessment and look at your bioresonance scan again. And I think there's,
And for bioresonance, which is the biofeedback you're talking about, right?
yeah, biofeedback is trademarked. Bioresonance is the majority of devices. I mean, there's so many of them that exist too.
Yeah. And so I want to post this in the community. This is basically like, this is our first podcast.
All right, cool.
Okay. So this is basically me interviewing Joe, the guest, about all of his awesome work. So tell me a little bit more about bioresonance. Like, I personally have a very low level understanding of it. I've had someone practice it on me, a chiropractor, when I was at some like personal development seminar one time, and it was really fascinating. He had like a whole briefcase, and he may have been doing something that's not exactly what you're talking about. This is why I want to ask. But he had this whole briefcase full of these little vials of different compounds and
Not
chemicals,
not
all sorts.
bioresonance.
Okay.
Maybe bioresonance, maybe.
And he would do it. He was doing like kinesiological testing,
Yep.
like pulling on my fingers and like tapping and stuff. And then he would have me like sometimes smell or even just, open the thing and just like wave it around me. It sounds so woo-woo when I talk about it like this, but it was fascinating. It was really fascinating because I could see an effect without really knowing what he was doing. I don't remember exactly what he called it, but we'll put that aside for now. I'll find out what that is. But tell me a little bit more about bioresonance and how that works.
Okay, so a little bit more about me, as long as you're going to throw this out there for background for other people, is I got my NLP certification and I was like, this is the power of the brain. Like, why weren't we taught this? They've been doing this stuff since the 50s in our military. Like, why weren't humans, made aware of this stuff? And then I had my own gut issues. So I'd been kind of healing from a compound fractured femur, then discovering that I had these gut issues. And I lived in California, and these people were really big into going and doing these biofeedback sessions, and they were like 6-month treatment plans. So everything was selling for 6 to 10 grand for these treatment sessions at the time. And I was really fascinated by being in rooms where people were talking about doing it and going to do it and whatever. But I was like, yeah, I'm not there to go experiment with that for myself right now. And I went back to Wisconsin and I met a woman who was doing a talk and she had biofeedback. So I was like, hey, can we grab tea? Like, I'd love to chat about this with you. And so she was explaining to me how she was working with one biofeedback device, and some people she just got results for them like immediately. But then she was getting other people and they were getting into like 10, 12 sessions and she just wasn't helping them. And she was really frustrated by it. So she was getting another piece of technology that she was bringing in to do it. So she was pretty caught up in playing with a lot of the different technologies as to like what gets results and what doesn't. And even to this day, she has a super unique practice in using it's a very popular hand scan, the Zyto scan, and you put your hand on it, and that can read, depending on the software, so many different aspects of what's happening. She also ended up getting a machine where she would test your meridians on your fingers and your toes and then match it to the homeopath frequencies that your body needed. Um, so I did some really cool experimenting with her after I'd already done a lot of like health stuff. But my big takeaway was like, you really didn't heal your gut. Like, I would do bad things, I would do good things, I'd do bad things. And she kept telling me, I'm reading your dirty mail. Because I would go there and I would be like, how do you know that? Like, I was having those thoughts on the ride here. How do you know that? Right. So the biofeedback became really fascinating in the sense that it was how I was treating myself. I was seeing it show up on these assessment scans. And then I was doing therapy scans while I was there with her. And so how I would feel days following that, just, paid attention to it, felt better. It was kind of cool, you know. Um, so that's a big way that I got into experimenting with myself without having the money to just keep dropping $1,500 for functional medicine testing, right? And then I, found more apps and there's more bioresonance devices that became available. And now I work with a practitioner who, when we do scans with people, it's like give them the assessment, do some mindset work with them about what it is that they're trying to accomplish and where they want to go. What does the assessment tell them about themselves for their gut health and the things that they know from things that she's been working on with her 3 types of scans. So she's helping people build their gut protocol and supplementation protocol based on 3 different energetic scans, as well as then using the device that she believes in the most for regular therapy session scans for like 6 weeks. And then a follow-up assessment scan to, look and see what has changed since you started and where you're at. And of course I did this for my mom as the first person that I wanted to like figure this out for her, of like, hey, how does this work for you, mom? And it was really cool to see the results and different things, as I got into it for other people and whatnot.
So, so my understanding of how it works is like you place like these electrodes on the skin, and healthy cells emit, I mean, all cells emit an electromagnetic frequency. Is that correct? And then anything that's like diseased or out of balance is going to have an altered frequency that bioresonance then corrects using the device, or using other modalities as well, like supplements or homeopathic stuff, or
That's the experiment for all of us, is because you can play with homeopathics. That's one type of energetic. There's, what type of laser do you have? What type of TENS unit do you have? Can you program a TENS unit or a laser for certain frequencies, than with infrared light or just red light? There's these different variances that energy then impacts us, and it's the programming in these different bioresonance devices. Like, who was in charge of the programming and what are they ultimately trying to program into the different people? It's a little bit of the reason I'm kind of skeptical of neurofeedback, because it seems to me it's like one type of programming that's who created that for putting that into some people. So does it really give your unique genius, or is it kind of giving a normal brain pattern that here just keep getting this over and over again?
yeah.
So, whether we're taking a bunch of herbs or we're taking a bunch of pharmaceuticals, as soon as we're taking more than one thing, we're kind of experimenting, or we're experimenting the second we take one thing.
Yeah,
It's going to change our hormones, right?
confounding the variables.
Yeah. So there's
But so you're using the bioresonance device more as like an assess and reassess kind of.
as an assess, and then depends on what you want out of it. Like, what are the results that the person wants? Like, are you trying to get better sleep? Are you trying to lose weight? Do you have adrenaline and cortisol issues that are going on? Are you trying to get pregnant? Like, what is the goal as to like that, where a person's health is at? Because then the assessment says, hey, this is what's going on in all these different areas of the body. And then depending on what goals they want, then you go in and you're like, okay, we got to start to improve the body function in this way first. So a gentleman who helps regrow body parts, which seems weird, but like a lizard loses its tail, he helps. His number one clients are women who have had stage 4 breast cancer, had breasts removed. They're getting diagnosed for like the 3rd or the 4th time, and they don't want to do the medical route anymore. And so they find him, they join his PMA, because he can't tell you anything that he can do unless you're part of his private membership association for licensing reasons and state laws and all of that good stuff that the government puts into place. But you see literally the tumors grow out of his patients' chests, and then they regrow their breasts that the medical establishment had already removed. And that's wild, right? But he uses acupressure points in the people's ears with micro frequencies, and he doesn't really worry about people's diets. unless they're like fibromyalgia or MS. And he pretty much starts to give the energy their body needs to their kidneys, their liver, and their small intestines. And then the body basically starts the innate intelligence process of detoxifying and healing itself. But the frequencies, according to him, change depending on where you are in the world and what season it is. Which I was like, that's taking this energy stuff to a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And it's so, you know, to be totally um impartial and non-biased and fair, I guess. Fair is a relative term, maybe. But, you know, for in the scientific world, you're not going to see a lot of stuff about like bioresonance. It's because it's an alternative therapy with not a lot of clear scientific research behind it, according to the mainstream medical establishment.
100%.
Right.
But
But that doesn't mean, yeah, like that doesn't
big
mean,
but.
yeah, much like acupuncture until very recently was called pseudoscience and just dismissed out of hand by most mainstream medical professionals. And now it's being studied like massively all over the place for tons of different things. And they're showing incredible results for all sorts of different therapies. I mean, my dog is getting acupuncture for her cancer treatments, and they're doing a research study on her at that clinic, and it's showing great results, like for her recovery, for, you know, in conjunction with the conventional medicine. So
I didn't.
we should never dismiss these things out of hand. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
And they may seem like fantastical and incredible, like the anecdotes that you're just telling us about this doctor. And he's probably got some, you know, some data that he's been gathering, I would hope, on his own
Sure.
on his own patients and everything. And it's, you know, I don't want to get into like the vaccine debate right now. We'll save that for another day. But it's a similar thing, you know, there's a lot of people out there being totally demonized, and careers are being destroyed because they're taking a position that's contrary to the popular and the mainstream and the profitable, we might say. So I just want to put that out there for everybody that might watch this and is like, what the hell is this bioresonance stuff? It's like, yes, it's alternative, but just because something's alternative does not mean that it doesn't work, and that everyone should do their own research, and with something as low risk as this, or like an acupuncture, or, you know, these non-invasive therapies, oftentimes they're, you know, they can be a great resource, and something, if you find a great practitioner, you know, like this doctor you're talking about, or that woman that you were talking about, that have a lot of experience and have made a career out of this and are very passionate about it and understand this at a level like what you're talking about with these frequencies and the changing seasons and the parts of the world. And like for each organ, I know there's like different frequencies that they emit, and it's like, wow, it's nuts. It's so far removed from what we're used to hearing about that for some people it's a huge jump, like cognitively. And so my point with this little rant is to try to help bridge that gap a little bit. That just, you know, again, I say this all the time, and it's not my saying, but um I don't know who said it first, but it's been around the block. But any advanced science is indistinguishable from magic, right? And that's how a lot of these therapies that have been around for so long look. They look like magic, and most people will just dismiss it because of that, because they don't understand it. And I'm just saying, let's not do that. Let's be open-minded. So,
And it's our perception based on our experiences, based on the box that we grew up in,
yeah, exactly.
right? So for me, I grew up in a box that told me I had to do all of these things a certain way, but I got curious about other possibilities that I saw in the world. So I only became aware of it because I just started experimenting on myself in a sense that wasn't the norm, right? And then to your point of where we are in today's world, Switzerland only a couple of years ago has recognized that homeopathic medicine is a super valid scientific approach to helping people heal. But I think it's like the only country in the world that'll like acknowledges the powers of homeopathic medicine, right? Which is like, whoa, we're going there, we're getting there. And I love that you related it to magic too, right? Because when we step outside of the the lens that is kind of shoved down our throat with the boxes that we have in place in the world, and then you get into different environments where people ignore the boxes that were created, and the magic that can be created in those other environments that you only witness if you're in those rooms, right? And so the doctors that have been doing this stuff and pioneering it, like Dr. Robert Reif, I think it was Dr. Reif, either way, he put out all of his research on frequency, which is why there's so many bioresonance and frequency devices even in the market to this day. And each of those companies are doing their own science, just like the medical pharmaceutical industry that buys and pays for the journals for them to put their science into, that then gets everyone to be like, science, right? And you said we're not going to go there with vaccines today, but the interesting aspect of the virus is I have a friend who's doing an analysis on people's blood, dried blood analysis, and it's a bioresonance analysis. And they're being able to determine if someone has mRNA presence, if someone has DNA damage. What's the other thing? mRNA presence, DNA damage, and spike protein presence. So do you have a bunch of spike protein presence just because you've been dealing with whatever has been out there in the world, if you didn't get the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
So like where this is going from an energetic standpoint, because in the interview I did with him, he's not sure that people aren't energetically contracting, you know, issues. Like they have a red, yellow, and green report, and there's people who are not getting it that are coming back with
There,
like yellow.
there's some issues of vaccine like shedding, right?
Well, and like how it's spoken about, like we just don't like it's
Right.
just so controversial and not it's not an open discussion. So it's kind of kind of cool that you're letting me talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm doing a lot of that research for myself and for my kids right now. Um, Over and above what I've already done. As you know, I coach a group through Next Level Neuro for long COVID, or what we call neuro recovery, because long COVID might not be the best word to use for it.
But it's the symptoms.
But it's the symptoms that are left over after having COVID or after having one of the vaccines. And they're all neurological in nature, which is why Next Level Neuro had built the program. So anyway, beyond the research that I've done specifically just on the COVID vaccine and the mRNA vaccine specifically, and that I'm kind of really diving deep into the childhood vaccine schedule and what's going on with all of that. And it's a deep, 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 dark rabbit hole. Which I'm not like totally comfortable yet, like going into it, but we can definitely have a conversation on here, maybe in a couple weeks about it, because I know you're pretty knowledgeable about it, and I have some questions and stuff, but
I'm as
yeah,
much skeptical as I am knowledgeable. I definitely have friends who have read more of the books, right?
Yeah, I think just that's one of the things, if we can stay kind of meta about all of it, that's one of the things that I think we need more of in general in the world, but especially when it comes to Western medicine and our healthcare system, is healthy amount of skepticism. Like we hold some of our healthcare professionals to such a high, we put them on a pedestal. We don't hold them to a high standard. We think that we do, and they say that they do, hold themselves to a high standard, but I don't think that they do a lot of the time. And
Well,
I don't think it's a lot of times even their fault. I think they're so overworked and burnt out themselves that keeping up with the latest research on something like that mRNA vaccine is just almost impossible for them to do. So they too trust their establishment and what it's telling them. But when you really dig down underneath all of it, there's motivations that I think are more nefarious than we want to believe. Because I think on the whole, we are trusting. Human beings are trusting. And we want to believe that our country and our government and the people in power have our best interests in mind. But I think with COVID, especially, it's becoming more and more apparent that that's just it's not exactly the case. So we need more of that individual, healthy skepticism, not cynicism, but skepticism.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's been, not that specifically, but when you brought up the recovery group, and the recovery group for me has been really fascinating to get to know different individuals that have gotten into the mentorship and stuff that came through recovery.
Mhm.
And just my experience over the last 15 years of always talking with people who had whatever health crisis. And then at one point in time, Matt saying, this isn't quite in the research, but if you connect the dots in the research, Lyme's disease, autoimmune, long COVID, like maybe MS, like all of these things are just pointing right to these brainstem neurological issues needing training. And then meeting the people in the groups and seeing their transformations once they start doing the training
Yeah.
is, has just been way, way cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's the sad thing about that is if he were to take that message to Congress or the CDC and connect those dots, they would call him a quack. They'd say this pseudoscience has no place here. You're full of shit. Get out. And because they couldn't prove him otherwise wrong, because that's the hard thing about all of this that we do is that it's hard to do, the gold standard randomized controlled trials because you can't control for it.
well,
They got the
you're
intervention
either
or not.
eating a you're either eating a pineapple or you're not eating a pineapple.
Exactly. That's why nutrition is so hard as well. Yeah. And so you can't study it in that way. It's also not profitable for the pharmaceutical companies in power to sell this drug. So it's not in their benefit to go along with this narrative. So if they can't prove that wrong, then their MO, sadly, is to attack the individual and to discredit an individual, right? To hopefully kill the argument and make it go away. So, that's why this stuff, because I was often asked this question early on. It's like, why isn't neuro enormous right now? Why isn't everyone doing this everywhere? And simply put, it's because it's not as scalable as a drug, right? It's not, you know, it's
It's
much harder.
individualized.
It's individualized, and it's there's no money in it for the big players. It's like any non-invasive natural remedy. Western medicine wants nothing to do with it because it's not profitable. It's not improving their bottom line. It's unfortunate. It means it'll probably stay more on the outside until the grassroots, gets to a point where it's demanded of the establishment to put this in their training.
To me, it's at that point. It's not at the point where there's enough people who have the knowledge to really support people.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see because, I'm just so in the midst of it. Like I have no more perspective like outside of the neuro world because I'm so deep into it. Like everyone I know is neuro now.
So
So,
two other groups that I, quasi work with or whatever.
yeah.
My friend who does the mRNA test analysis, it's an analysis. He has a group, and they're getting into the neurology side of it because he's had exposure to me, right? So it's like, hey, let's
Yeah.
get this people
Good.
going doing this kind of training, right? And then another friend who an old college roommate who became a naturopath that used to have these $25,000 packages to help people do the functional testing side of what they do. I've been having the conversations with their group around how the neurology training needs to be the addition to, what they've already found is working. Because he used to do all the Amen testing, but then in the feedback from the patients, like the time away from work, all these other like factors and the cost of it, like it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
uh and he didn't need the scan to start getting the results that he was getting from a functional testing standpoint.
Hmm.
And that's like 5 grand for a year now. So
Hmm.
they took what was once at 25 grand helping people through, and even their blood work testing blew my mind as to everything that they tell you for the first $500 initial conversation,
Hmm.
which is kind of cool too. So, the industry, whether it was Dr. Reif releasing his research and now all of these bioresonance devices that exist, or now more people realizing that they need testing done. So now there's more testing companies that are trying to get their biggest buck that want to get the information back to people, or, the people who have gone alternative. When I was back in Wisconsin in the spring, one of the big hospital care systems has their own new big building downtown for their alternative health program for all of their employees at the hospital,
Hmm. That's
which
great.
to me was a huge shift. Like I had no idea
Yeah.
that a hospital system was actually trying to take care of their people, because for the most part, I feel like they're trying to kill them, working them under 12-hour shifts and fluorescent lights and, you know, the craziness that the system does to its own people with the biggest bleeding hearts, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Two things that we've kind of discussed. One, the frequency of cellular stuff. Dr. Jerry Tennant is he was a dentist that during a procedure breathed in a virus and then was put into a wheelchair and couldn't do anything. And in his words, at some point in time, was he had to help himself because the idiots weren't helping him get better. So here he can't really communicate and he can't do these things, but for about 2 hours a day, he could think clearly. And he got into energy devices and using them on meridians. And now he's really popular for a device that he uses and teaches people to use on their meridians. And he talked about a healthy cell has like a half a volt of energy. And once the cell starts to get below a half a volt or 0.25, then cancer can start to show up in the cells, which to me just gets to be pretty fascinating. If you're, there's other people that'll tell you to hold on to a voltmeter, But then a lot of people, when they hold voltmeters, they're at like 3 volts or 30 volts,
Hmm.
depending on the person, or if they're touching, a table that has a computer on it or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, those get to be kind of interesting little self experiments when you can do that. So that's, from my perspective, once you start talking about the cellular health, the nutrients, how do we help these organ systems? And then you're getting them into energy, and you can look in a bioresonance snapshot of it. Yeah, as much as I, can speak to my old roommate and a $5,000 a year program where you're going to look at functional testing being, a good bang for the buck, you can also just be doing sessions with bioresonance and getting into some of that for the half the cost, but not the length of the term.
Sure.
It gets you started, but you don't always have to keep occurring some of those expenses either, right? Within how you want to experiment with yourself. The other thing that I was saying when I said two things is when we were talking about the testing,
Mhm.
my dad had a heart problem, went to the emergency room, told him to follow up with his physician. A couple days later, he was working on a rental property before he was going to see his physician, and he fell off the ladder and hit his head. They ended up med flighting him to Madison, and they couldn't operate on his heart. And he had a massive heart issue that they were guessing based on the symptoms, that his physician would have completely missed. So they were like, it's a blessing he fell off the ladder.
Yeah.
Dad
Wow.
didn't really think hitting his head was a complete blessing by any means.
Yeah.
Um, but they couldn't operate on his head because of his heart, and they couldn't operate on his heart because of his head. So, he just let his body heal for 13 days without doing anything. And
Hmm.
then he went in and he had the open heart surgery to repair his heart. And after the procedure, the physician comes in and is, asking us, the family, do you have any questions? And I was like, yeah, how many medications will he be taking now? And the physician named off 5 medications. And I was just kind of had my own opinions and thoughts about that, which he clearly read all over my body language. And he's like, well, let's talk about that. And I was like, nah, the rest of my family doesn't really want to hear about that. He goes, no, it's really important that, like, this is a room. Your father just went through this surgery. Like, you need to be seen. So if you've got something going on, like, let's talk about it, which was really cool, I thought, on his part.
I agree. Yeah.
And I said, well, my dad just had a dried and live blood cell analysis. Prick your finger, look at your blood under a microscope, let the blood dry on another piece of paper, and look at that under a microscope and learn different things about people, right? It's another one of my favorite ways that people can learn about what's going on in their body. And he they told him, like, your arteries are clogging and you should start taking these different herbal concoctions for changing that. And the doctor was like, well, you know, that's all good and that's probably true, but there's not as much science to what's been done with these medications versus the herbs. And I chuckled with the gentleman and I said, well, the herbs have kind of been around for decades and centuries versus the medicine that has the science is only studied one at a time. And he said, that's true. And I said, so you named off 5. And he said, and that's true. And I said, so really, whether dad takes herbs or he takes the medications, he's a guinea pig. And the physician said, that's true. And I looked around at the rest of my family and I was like, I told you. I told you. Right. And I didn't care. I said to him, I don't care what dad chooses, but I want him to make decisions that are, he's trying to make sure his cholesterol is good. He's trying to make his blood pressure good. He's trying to, like, take care of his arteries. Like, I want his thinking in those regards, but I don't want his solution to only be medication.
Yeah.
Right. And I said, and that's his call. And the physician was like, well, that's cool of you to, like, not be putting that type of pressure or thinking that way. And this doctor was really cool because I ended up also talking to him about my dad's mindset. And I was like, well, if you, you know, if you tell dad to do these things, he'll go out and do them. Like whatever the doctor said, dad does. Like he's really good at following the rules that his doctor says to him.
Mhm.
And he said, why don't you just email me about some of those things? And then at the follow-up appointment, he's like, I'll see you there. And I was like, yeah, I'll be driving him. He's like, with the follow-up appointment, we'll discuss the email. And I said, okay. So I emailed him, mindset tips of reducing stress and stuff for the heart issue, basically, right? And we'll take dad to the appointment and he ducks in and dad's talking to the nurse and he's like, hey, can you talk with me? And I said, yeah. And so we go across the hall and I'm sitting across the hall talking with him. And he's like, you got a lot of incredible points in your email. He's like, I would love to be able to say those things to your father. And I said, but, and he's kind of finding ways that he wants to say something. But at this point, I already knew the but. So I said, it's outside your box. And he said, yes.
Yeah.
Said, if I do something from insurance perspectives, I can't say these things because what I did was the surgery. And the surgery is what I'm responsible for. So that type of information, that's just great mindset information. It's outside of what my scope allows me to do in my practice.
Yeah.
I was like, that's pretty jacked up.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
But we went back across the hallway because I understood the position that he was in a very big medical hospital at UW-Madison.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really important story and experience for everybody to hear. And there's a lot of great like nuggets in there. But I think the biggest and most important one is to realize that while, our medical professionals are, very intelligent, experienced, oftentimes great people with altruistic and very honorable intentions 90% of the time. They're still working within a system that puts certain restrictions and rules on them that they have to follow in order to be successful in the sense that they even can do their job effectively. Like if that doctor were to go outside of his scope and his standard of care that has been put forth by the board at his hospital, in his state, and by the insurance companies that pay for reimbursements for those procedures, which they have a very strict standard of care that they have to adhere to. And if you go beyond that or outside of that, you are at risk. You put yourself at risk. You put your employees at risk. There's a lot of pressure on those people. And so asking them to go outside of their scope is really, for most, it's too big a leap and it's too big of a risk to take. So they're going to stay within, and that's okay, because our medical system for certain things like having open heart surgery is incredible. 100%. Like traumatic injuries, surgeries, stuff like that. It's the best in the world. But for the recovery, for like everyday health, for avoiding open heart surgeries and that kind of stuff, they're maybe not the most knowledgeable or free or best voice or opinion in some of those matters. And at the end of the day, like my last point here before we jump off here is that you got to take it into your own hands. You really have to be your own advocate with this and have a healthy sense of skepticism and talk to more than one person, please. like, and talk to people in the healthcare establishment. Talk to your regular doctors and the specialists and whoever you're talking to, and talk to people outside of that with a different perspective. Talk to people like Joe. Talk to people that are investigating these alternative therapies. Talk to people that have knowledge of some of this stuff that humans have been doing for literally thousands of years and successfully treating some of these chronic conditions with non-invasive and more natural remedies, right?
Or the chronic conditions never even existed.
Or that, yeah. And how is that possible? Talk to some people about that. I'm just saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, and just make informed decisions the best you can by getting varying opinions.
And the opinions of the people in the system are super cool opinions.
Yeah.
It's the
Oh,
system that's questionable.
agreed. Yeah. Good distinction. Cool. I gotta go see some babies, but thank you, Joe, for being here. This was great. Like, this was,
Yeah, this was fun.
I think this might organically actually turn into something. Kind of just like turned into like a little podcast. I was very happy to just be able to kind of ask you questions and conversation. Um, so yeah, I'll be here same time next week. Joe, if you want to show up, great to
Hey,
have. Anybody else? Love to see
one
it.
other one other little add-on in terms of like the people and they're looking for their nuances of like, is it this or is it this or is it this or is it this?
Yeah.
The one thing that drives me bonkers about the system is the system will say, okay, we'll get you on the calendar. Okay, 2 months, you're gonna get your opportunity. So whatever's your concern, you fret about for 2 months. And then you get to the appointment and you go in and you do the thing, and then they're gonna let you wait 2 weeks before they tell you about it.
Right.
Right. So what I'm gonna say is that every day you're training your neurology and you're moving and you're doing something. So do good things. And every day you're raising your hand to your mouth and you're drinking things and you're eating things. So in that 2 month time period that they make you wait, in that 2 week time period that your just stress is even going crazier because you still don't know what's going on from a test, like keep doing the stuff so you have a belief system that's going to be good for you instead of just falling into their system 100%. Like you might need to use the system. That's fine. Use the system. Just don't become a victim of it in the process.
Well put. That was perfect. Perfect place to end. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for
Thanks.
being here. Appreciate it. I'll get this uploaded. And yeah, see you later, everybody.